I knew something was off the second he leaned back in that glass fishbowl he calls an office, the city skyline behind him like he'd personally built it. He was grinning, that smug, I've already won kind of grin, and tapping a gold pen against his desk like he was conducting an orchestra only he could hear. Your replacement, he said, drawing out each word as if savoring a fine wine, is an expert from Google. She starts Monday. The sentence hung in the air like cheap cologne. He watched my face like a cat waiting for a mouse to twitch. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I let the silence stretch, gave him a flat, neutral nod, and adjusted the folder in my hands as if we were discussing lunch options instead of my 17-year career. His smirk faltered for half a heartbeat. Inside, I was boiling, not because I feared being replaced, but because I knew damn well nobody from Google just lands here without a reason. We're a mid-tier federal contractor, not some dream startup in the valley. You don't leave stock options and beanbag chairs to come manage a bunch of procurement headaches and security clearance protocols, unless there's a bigger play. That was my first red flag. I've been in operations too long not to smell when something's rotten. This guy, my brand new VP with the paper-thin resume padded with buzzwords, thought he was pulling a masterstroke. What he didn't realize was that I've buried more secrets in this company than he's read in his life, and the wrong hire can trigger tripwires you can't tape over. I sat there, letting him run through his little monologue. He spun some nonsense about fresh perspectives and synergy with our future vision, like he'd stolen the phrases from a corporate seminar he barely understood. I didn't interrupt. The less I said now, the more space he had to hang himself later. When he finished his pep talk, I simply asked, anything else? It caught him off guard. He expected me to beg for my job, protest, maybe rage a little. Instead, I walked out, passing our reflection in the glass wall, him leaning back, still trying to look victorious, me already halfway gone in my mind. Rest of the day, people kept finding excuses to hover near my desk. Whispers about the new hire trickled through the office like bad coffee through a filter. Supposedly, she managed security architecture for international data centers, one engineer muttered. Her LinkedIn spotless, said another, which to me was the opposite of reassuring. Real pros have scars, contradictions, gaps in their history. Polished means curated, and curated means someone's hiding the mess. I forwarded my final reports to the archive, locked down the shared folders under my purview, and cleared my desk with the precision of someone who's done this before, not because I've been fired, but because I know the value of leaving no fingerprints. That's when the most important action of the day happened. I made a single phone call in the parking lot. Short, direct, no names. Just a date, a time, and the phrase she's in. Then I hung up. Driving home, I replayed his expression in my mind. That smugness wasn't just arrogance, it was desperation wearing arrogance as a mask. I'd seen it before when someone bets their entire standing on a single move, and I knew this guy had no idea what kind of move he'd just made. Monday was coming, and I was going to be there, front row seat, to watch him choke on it. Friday morning, I drafted my farewell email in under 3 minutes. No warm reflections, no list of accomplishments, no inspirational quotes. Just, today is my last day. It's been a privilege to work alongside you all. Please direct all operational matters to VP Walker going forward. Sent it to the all-staff list, shut my laptop, and waited for the quiet ripple to roll through the building. People trickled by my desk in ones and twos, clutching coffee cups like talismans. Most avoided eye contact until they were close enough to mumble something about being sorry to see me go. Some lowered their voices, like the walls had ears, which, in this place, wasn't paranoia. The whispers always carried the same refrain, her resume's almost too perfect. Someone claimed she'd optimized multi-cloud infrastructures for global teams, a phrase so vague it could mean anything or nothing. Another said she'd worked in special compliance oversight for Fortune 50 clients, which was the corporate equivalent of saying, don't ask too many questions. I nodded, thanked them, didn't feed the rumor mill. The less I said, the more the pieces could arrange themselves without me pushing. Walker probably thought I'd slink out bitter and defeated, maybe leave a snide remark or two for HR to flag. Instead, I packed my things slowly, deliberately. Every sticky note, every pen, every old badge from past access zones went into the box. No stray traces for someone else to misinterpret. By noon, the office had settled into that awkward pre-weekend mode, people half working, half watching me in their peripheral vision. Walker hadn't stopped by once, which suited me fine. He was probably upstairs polishing his Monday speech about fresh blood and strategic reinvigoration. I'd let him have his moment for now. I handed him my badge at reception, feeling the weight of 17 years condensed into a plastic rectangle and a cardboard box. The guard gave me a sympathetic look but said nothing. Outside, the air smelled like late fall, sharp, metallic, with that faint hint of rain that makes you check the sky twice. I walked to my car, loaded the box into the back seat, and just stood there for a moment, letting the building loom in my rearview mirror. That's when I pulled out my phone. One call, same number as yesterday. No names, no greetings. She starts Monday, I said, my voice low and steady. Make sure the right people know. A pause on the other end. just breathing, then a short understood. Click, call ended. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot without looking back. From the outside, it looked like the exit of a tired, middle-aged operations manager who'd been replaced by someone shinier. Inside, I was running calculations, not about severance or retirement, but about timing, jurisdiction, and how fast a bad decision can metastasize when the wrong eyes are watching. The weekend stretched ahead of me like a held breath. Monday was going to be interesting. I walked back into the building Monday morning like I'd never left, my old badge replaced with a bright red visitor tag swinging against my chest. Walker had insisted I do the professional thing and come in for proper handover. Fine by me, I wanted to see this circus with my own eyes. From the moment I stepped onto the operations floor, it was obvious he was staging a show. Walker was strutting beside her like a proud car salesman with a fresh-off-the-truck luxury model. The Google expert was everything he'd promised. Sharp blazer, flawless hair, voice calibrated to carry just far enough without sounding loud. Her handshake had that studied firmness you learn in a corporate training module. She introduced herself to people like she already owned the place, tossing in buzzwords like scalability and deep compliance alignment as if sprinkling confetti. Within 10 minutes, she had her brand new laptop open and was already in the system. I noticed her fingers moving quickly over the keyboard, not exploratory, like a newcomer feeling her way around, but targeted. She navigated straight to back-end dashboards most hires didn't even know existed in their first week. No hesitation, no asking where to find things. That's not normal for day one, that's pre-mapped. Walker beamed at her like a proud parent. He had no idea that every file she opened, every system she accessed was logged somewhere I still had friends watching. It wasn't my job anymore, but old habits die hard, and old allies don't forget favors. As I moved through the handover motions, pointing out standard workflows, and pretending to answer her questions, I caught a glimpse of her afternoon calendar. She had a meeting blocked for 2 p.m. with one of our highest security clients, the kind that required not just corporate clearance, but federal-level vetting and compartmentalized access protocols. I'd worked with that client for over a decade. Even I didn't get into those meetings without a month of paperwork and 3 separate approvals. Seeing her name on that invite made something in my gut tighten. I asked, casually, "You already got cleared for that one?" She smiled, eyes flat. Walker expedited it. That was all she said before pivoting back to the dashboard. I watched the VP puff up beside her, explaining to a small knot of department heads how she was going to streamline our entire compliance infrastructure and enhance cross-platform synergy, phrases so hollow they echoed in my ears. Every time he said Google, I could practically hear the capital G. I nodded when he looked my way, keeping my expression neutral. But my mind was already running scenarios. That meeting wasn't just unusual for first day, it was a powder keg. I knew what those clients were working on, who they were tied to, and exactly how sensitive the projects were. You didn't just drop a stranger into that room without setting off alarms, unless, of course, you didn't know the alarms were already primed. The clock crawled toward lunch, the tension in my chest growing tighter with every minute. I could feel it in the air, that subtle electric shift when something is about to tip. Not everyone could sense it, but after 17 years, I could read this place like barometric pressure. And today, the storm was already rolling in. It was 11:46 when the air in the lobby changed. You could feel it before you saw them, that stiff, heavy shift when people who don't belong suddenly walk in like they own the place. 2 men in dark suits stepped through the glass doors, both carrying the kind of presence that says they weren't here for a vendor meeting or a friendly lunch. No visitor tags. No clipboards, no smiles, just a brief glance at reception, then a direct, unbroken line toward Walker's office. The receptionist started to stand, but the taller one flashed something, not a badge I recognized, not corporate credentials, but something metallic and fast enough that she sat right back down. They didn't sign in. They didn't ask for directions. They knew exactly where they were going. From my seat at the far end of the operations floor, I had the perfect vantage point. Walker's glass office faced the aisle, so I caught the moment his body language snapped from cocky to rigid. He rose halfway out of his chair as the suit stepped inside, closing the door behind them. Blinds snapped shut within seconds. The room outside the room went still. Keystrokes slowed. Conversations trailed off. Even the printer down the hall seemed to hesitate. People kept their eyes on their screens, but angled themselves ever so slightly toward the show. At 11:53, the new hire was in the break area. Mid-laugh over some anecdote she was telling a couple of engineers, fork halfway to her mouth. Her phone buzzed, probably nothing unusual, but then she looked up as a floor security guard approached, trailed by one of the suits. The guard didn't touch her, didn't speak loudly, but his hand extended in that unmistakable "I need your badge" gesture. She froze for a half-second, then set her fork down. Her access card came off her lanyard without protest. From across the room, I watched as she tried to hand her laptop to one of the engineers, a reflexive move, maybe to leave it with someone she thought was on her side. The suit stepped forward, took it from her without a word, and held it tucked under his arm like evidence. The engineers mumbled something about what's going on, but she didn't answer. Her smile was gone. In its place, a blank, measured expression, the kind people wear when they've been in situations like this before. By now, Walker had reappeared in the hallway, his face pale but set in an awkward mask of authority. He trailed the suits as they flanked her, one in front, one behind. They moved quickly but without the theater of a perp walk, just the quiet, undeniable finality of people who didn't need to explain themselves. The floor's collective attention tunneled in on that small procession. Screens dimmed. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips. It was one of those moments where everyone pretends not to watch, yet every eye in the room is locked on the scene. They reached the elevator without a single raised voice. She stepped inside, turned to face the closing doors, and for the briefest moment, her gaze swept the floor, not angry, not pleading, just a flicker of something that looked almost like resignation. Then the doors sealed, and the hum of the office returned in brittle, disjointed fragments. No one said it out loud, but every person in that room knew. Whatever just happened, it wasn't a simple HR matter. This was something bigger, something that didn't end at our front doors. They didn't bring her back. The elevator ride down must have been fast, because less than a minute after those doors closed upstairs, the lobby security feed, always muted but running on a wall monitor, caught the moment she stepped out between the two suits. Still no cuffs, no hands on her, but the geometry was unmistakable. One leading, one shadowing her flank, the way you move someone who isn't resisting but absolutely isn't free to go. From my angle, I could see Walker trailing them into the lobby like a man chasing his own reputation. His voice didn't carry on the muted feed, but his gestures did, palms out, half-shrugged shoulders, the universal weight, you can't just posture. He got nothing for his trouble. Neither suit even glanced his way. I left my desk under the pretense of getting coffee, but positioned myself just close enough to the elevator bank to catch the sound when the next car arrived. Walker came back up alone, face flushed, tie askew. He muttered something into his phone, pacing. Then, like a ripple starting at the far edge of the floor, whispers began threading from cubicle to cubicle. Someone from reception had come back with a sliver of intel, not official, just overheard when one of the suits stepped aside to answer a call. Two words stood out in the retelling: active investigation. That was enough to spark every conspiracy circuit in the building. But the kicker came from one of the network admins, who swore he'd caught another fragment when the shorter suit flashed his ID at the front desk. Federal jurisdiction. The words passed like contraband from ear to ear. Federal jurisdiction meant this wasn't a corporate audit, and it sure as hell wasn't about her paperwork being lost in onboarding. This was bigger, sharper, and operating on a plane Walker didn't even have a map for. I could feel the whole floor leaning toward the story, desperate for more pieces. People stared harder at their screens, pretending to work while their ears scanned for any clue. Someone joked under their breath about clearing browser histories. Someone else shushed them. Walker reappeared at his office door a few minutes later, barking into his phone. His voice was low but tight, the kind that comes from trying to sound in control when you're already bleeding authority. Every few sentences, he'd stop and listen, then run a hand over his hair like he could press the stress back into his scalp. From my desk, I kept my head down, scrolling through old notes on my tablet like I was reviewing work for the handover. In reality, I was watching the rhythms, who Walker called first, who he avoided, how quickly the rumor had morphed from weird first-day glitch to this could sink us. The thing about federal jurisdiction is it doesn't end when someone leaves the building. If they'd come for her here, it was because something she'd done, or was about to do, intersected directly with our systems, our clients, or both. And in our world, that was the kind of intersection that came with consequences you couldn't PR your way out of. By the time lunch officially hit, the floor had split into two camps, those pretending it was none of their business, and those pretending harder. But every single one of them was listening. By the time the cafeteria smells started drifting through the vents, Walker had already launched his damage control tour, emerged from his glass office wearing the kind of strained half-smile you see on politicians after a bad headline, and he made the rounds, hitting clusters of employees like a campaigner on the trail. Minor background check discrepancy, he called it. Said it with a dismissive wave, as though two men in dark suits hauling off his star hire was no more serious than a typo on a W-4. He even threw in a little laugh, the kind meant to signal, see, I'm in on the joke. Nothing to worry about. The performance might have worked on people new enough not to know better. But 17 years in this building taught me the difference between a hiccup and a hemorrhage, and this was the latter. You could hear it in the constant low trill of his desk phone, barely 2 minutes passing between calls, each one sending him scurrying back to his office, closing the door, lowering his voice. By 1:15, word filtered down from someone in contracts. Our biggest government client, the one with the high-clearance projects and the most to lose from security contamination, had suspended all work with us effective immediately. Not a pause, not a slowdown, a full stop pending formal review. Translation: they were freezing us out until someone in a very tall building downtown decided we were clean again. And that was going to take a hell of a lot more than a PR statement. The silence that followed that news was different from the earlier gossip buzz. This one had weight. People suddenly looked busy for real, like they were trying to prove their hands were clean. You could practically feel employees mentally inventorying their work for anything that might look questionable under a microscope. Meanwhile, HR began their own quiet hunt. It started with one of the coordinators showing up in records with that too polite smile. Just doing some file housekeeping, she told the clerk, need to confirm the onboarding documents for our newest executive hire. But the requests weren't broad, they were surgical. They asked for her resume, reference checks, clearance paperwork, and most telling of all, the hiring authorization forms. Every single one of those required Walker's signature. That was the tell. HR wasn't just archiving, they were building a chain of custody. And in corporate land, that chain always ends with someone's head on a platter. From my seat, I pretended to be knee-deep in spreadsheet walkthroughs for the handover, but my peripheral vision was locked on the movement. HR going in and out of the VP's office, Walker gesturing wildly, one hand still glued to the phone. The soundproofing wasn't great, I caught pieces. We vetted her, no, I don't know why, that was expedited at the request of before the blinds snapped shut again. Was unraveling faster than even I expected. The hire who was supposed to be his crown jewel had turned into a ticking bomb, and every second she'd been in the building was now radioactive. The calls wouldn't stop. The client freeze was only the first domino. And those HR document requests? That was someone upstream sharpening the knife. Walker had walked her in here like a prize he'd hunted himself. Now the trail of paperwork showed he'd loaded the gun, aimed it at the company, and pulled the trigger. He just hadn't realized yet that he was standing in the line of fire. It took less than 24 hours for the outlines of the real story to start bleeding through the noise. You just had to know which threads to pull, which silences meant more than the words people were speaking. One of my old contacts in compliance, someone who owed me for keeping their neck off the chopping block years back, slid past my desk under the pretense of needing to borrow an HDMI cable. As she was coiling it, she murmured low enough that anyone watching would just see casual chatter. She's not who she said she was, not even close. The pieces began clicking together faster than I could keep my face neutral. The Google expert wasn't just a ringer with a suspiciously polished resume, she was an active target in a federal fraud investigation. Not a suspect, not a maybe. A target, there's a difference. It meant someone somewhere had already built a case strong enough to watch her move to move. And today, she'd waltzed straight into their line of sight. The high-security client she was supposed to meet at 2 o'clock, they weren't just a government account. They were one of the investigative agencies working that very case. I'd been in those rooms. I knew how they operated. If she'd shown up in front of them wearing our company badge, wouldn't have been a handshake and a chat, it would have been an on-the-spot takedown in front of one of our most valuable contracts. But she never made it that far. The second her badge hit our system that morning, the backend triggered an automated compliance scan. Normally, it's just a box-ticking process, checking clearances, validating identities, running background pings. But with her, it lit up like a Christmas tree. Federal watch list hits. Ongoing case markers. Internal red flags flashing in 3 separate security divisions. And because she was tied to us now, those alerts didn't just go to our IT team, they fed directly into the agency's own channels. Within minutes, every contract we had with that client, and with any connected agency, was frozen. Millions of dollars, locked down before she'd even finished her morning coffee. Walker, of course, had no clue any of this was in motion. Thought he'd pulled off some genius coup by fast-tracking her into the role. What he'd actually done was invite a federal target into systems that handled classified project data. He'd put our security clearances, our client relationships, and our compliance history under a microscope we couldn't wiggle out from under. The best part? None of this was a surprise to certain people. People I'd spoken to, hypothetically, in parking lots on Friday afternoons. The moment her hiring was official, the right eyes were already watching. I didn't plant her here, but I didn't need to. Walker had done it to himself. All I'd done was make sure the right doors stayed open long enough for her to walk through them. From the sidelines, I kept my posture loose, my expression blank, as the realization started to spread through the executive floor like an oil slick. This wasn't about a mix-up. This was about federal jurisdiction, frozen contracts, and a VP who just gift-wrapped probable cause for every agency we'd ever dealt with. And that was when it hit me, the clause in my severance agreement. If the fallout from this tanked revenue more than 10% in a quarter, my payout tripled. Walker's pride was about to fund my early retirement. It was mid-afternoon when the floor went dead silent in that unnatural way, not because anyone told it to, but because something worth hearing was happening. Walker was at his desk, phone pressed so tight to his ear the cord looked ready to snap. From where I stood, halfway to the break room, I could hear every syllable, not because the CEO was shouting, but because his voice carried the kind of razor-edged clarity that cuts through walls. You brought a federal target into our systems, the CEO said, each word dropping like a weight. Do you have any idea what you've done? Walker's free hand gripped the arm of his chair so hard the leather creaked. His lips moved, stammering something about a background check, about vetting, about expedited onboarding. The CEO cut him off. No, stop talking. You don't expedite someone like this. You've compromised our clearance, our contracts, and my name. My name landed harder than anything else. In this company, reputations weren't just currency, they were survival. I watched as color drained from Walker's face, leaving that clammy, off-white shade that means someone's realizing their exit is no longer a question of if, but when. A few nearby employees were blatantly eavesdropping under the guise of typing. One guy's fingers hovered over his keyboard, frozen in mid-sentence. The CEO's voice dropped even lower, but the tension made every word audible. Do you understand that the agencies we serve will not touch us until this is resolved? That our Q4 numbers just took a hit we may not recover from? That your name is now in the incident log? Walker tried to speak again, something desperate about being set up, but the CEO didn't bite. Get into my office. Now. Then the line went dead. Walker just sat there for a moment, staring at the handset like it might offer him a way out. His shoulders sagged. The glass walls of his office, once his little stage, now framed a man stripped of the only thing holding him up, the illusion of control. Phones around the floor began to ring again, clients calling, contracts managers calling, maybe even reporters calling. It was the sound of the building digesting the disaster. I glanced at my watch, then at the elevator bank. I didn't need to hear the rest. The moment was already over for him. The next act would be lawyers, HR, and whatever cleanup crew the CEO kept on retainer. My part in this was finished. I walked across the floor, my visitor badge swaying against my chest, and pressed the elevator button. As the doors slid open, I caught one last glimpse of Walker through the glass, slumped, phone still in hand, the career he'd tried to supercharge with one flashy hire now burning to ash in real time. I stepped inside, let the doors close, and left the chaos to eat him alive without me. The hum of the city faded the moment I stepped into my lawyer's office, all glass, dark wood, and the faint smell of old money. He was already at the conference table, my severance paperwork spread out like a winning poker hand. No small talk, just a nod toward the chair opposite him. I've been waiting for this one, he said, sliding the top sheet my way. Do you remember this clause? I did. Hell, I'd fought for it 15 years ago, back when the company was half its size, and I still had enough leverage to slip something past legal without them fully grasping its value. It was one of those odd little provisions you negotiate for not because you think you'll use it, but because it's better to have a bullet in the chamber. The wording was plain. If company revenue decreases by more than 10% in a fiscal quarter, as a direct result of any incident occurring within 30 days of the employee's termination, severance payout will be multiplied by 3. He tapped the page. Contracts suspended. Government freezes in place. Project delays already stacking up. Based on projections, they'll be down at least 15% by the end of the quarter. He leaned back, smiling the way only someone who enjoys winning other people's wars can smile. You don't just qualify, you sail past the threshold. I skimmed the supporting documents he'd printed, client freeze notices, internal memos about revenue shortfalls, HR's own notes tying the fallout directly to the hiring fiasco. All roads pointed to Walker's golden hire, and by extension to the decision that replaced me. Irony so thick you could bottle it. My lawyer flipped the last page around to face me, the amended check request. The number at the bottom was obscene in all the right ways. All that's left, he said, is for the CEO to sign off. And between you and me, after this week he'll sign anything that makes one problem go away. Almost on cue, my phone buzzed in my bag. The caller ID, CEO. I didn't move to answer. We both watched it ring, the vibration skittering across the polished table until it went silent. You're not going to pick up, my lawyer asked, though he already knew the answer. No, I said, sliding the papers back toward him for processing. If he's calling, it's not to apologize, it's to negotiate. And I'm done negotiating. He chuckled, gathering the documents into a neat stack. We'll courier this over today. Funds should hit within the week. As I left, the late afternoon light caught on the brass door handle, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight slide off my shoulders. Walker would still be in that building, explaining himself to people who didn't want explanations. The CEO would still be trying to salvage contracts that were already gone. The Google expert would still be answering questions in a very different kind of room. Me, I had a check on the way and no further obligations. The chaos I'd walked away from was still burning, but it wasn't my fire anymore. And their panicked calls, they'd never reach me. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.